All right, gang, let's take a look at a real world example. We're going to look at the economy of Australia. And as we do, we're going to be asking ourselves, does this economy, does it seem more market based or does it seem more command based? And what evidence do we have that helps us or leads us to that conclusion? So here we go. Australia is the world's sixth smallest continent. It is also the world's sixth largest country. Australia is located between the Indian and South Pacific Oceans, and it has a very modern and competitive economy, and it is one of the world's richest countries. All right, so right out of the gate, there's some info that's irrelevant, like the size of the continent and where it's located. And there's some info that's very relevant, talking about how it has a very modern economy and it's one of the world's richest countries. Those are typically indicators, not always, but typically indicators that it is going to be an economy that is more on the market side of things. So let's read on. Major industries. Banking is an important industry in Australia. All banks are privately owned. There are four major banks. Government rules about banking are minimal. However, the government does not allow the four major banks to merge together, which helps banks compete fairly for business. So here again, we see very little government involvement, very little government regulation that would in fact suggest an economy that is going to be more market-based. However, we do see that there are rules. It says there is government involvement, but in this case, we need to be very careful. Anytime you see government, don't assume that it's bad or command or communism, right? In this case, what the government rules, they're just simply ensuring fair competition, right? They're saying that the banks can't merge together to form a monopoly. Now, again, if there was pure economic freedom, you'd say, well, who gives a rip if there's just one big mega bank to rule them all? That's economic freedom. True. However, in this case, we've got some rules put in place, but minimal rules to ensure fair competition. And competition, of course, is a pretty big hallmark of a market-based economy. Moving on, production of goods and services. Part of Australia's wealth comes from agriculture, manufacturing, and mining. The Australian government protects the rights of people to own private property. The government protects private property to encourage people to build profitable businesses. So here again, the government is involved, but it's not so much regulating what you can and cannot buy. It's more regulating and saying that your private property is your property. It's yours. Nobody can take it from you, and it's protecting that. One great example of this would be like intellectual property, like the works that you create, the artistic works that you create. They are yours. No one can rip it off and pass it off as their own. Distribution of goods and services. Businesses are fairly easy to start in Australia. The government does not have many limits or laws that limit what businesses may do. It does this to encourage people to start new businesses. The government allows most business owners to produce whatever they want, in whatever amount they want, and sell it to whomever they want. There are many different stores and restaurants that consumers can choose from. Foreign companies are also allowed to sell their goods and services in Australia. Wow, there is a lot of market-based evidence here, right? Talking about very few rules, businesses can make their own choices, encouraging folks to start their own businesses. All of this is a lot of market-based evidence. Government policies. All Australians pay high taxes. Some people pay up to 45% of their income tax in taxes. High taxes can limit economic growth. However, taxes can also be used to provide services to the people, and Australians value these services. Their tax money helps fund universities and hospitals. So here we see high taxes, which tends to suggest more elements of a command economy. But this is also something that Australians have said, yeah, that's something we value, and we're going to use that higher tax rate to ensure growth in our society through the form of education with universities and through hospitals and healthcare, ensuring that folks are healthy and productive. Level of economic development. GDP per capita is about $57,400 per person, and it is one measure that economists use to determine how developed an economy is. So this number, you don't have a lot of context for what that number means, at 57,400. I can tell you this. One, it's not the average income in Australia. GDP per capita is not that. Two, I can tell you that that's a pretty high GDP per capita. And again, generally speaking, a higher GDP per capita is more evidence of a market-based economy. So what economic priorities would you expect to be important in Australia? I would say economic freedom, because it seems like they have a lot of economic freedom as we go back through it and we look at those 6 different economic priorities. I would definitely suggest economic freedom, the freedom to make your own choice, and probably growth would seem to be pretty important to Australians because it's talking about letting businesses invest in themselves and grow. And then even to a degree, security seems important. It talks about, equity seems important because it talks about paying for universities and hospitals. But I would definitely say freedom and growth would be like the top 2 choices in Australia. And then where on the spectrum would you expect to find Australia down under? Sorry. I would expect it to be more on that market side. Definitely not way over here on the command. They're all mixed, but I would say Australia is probably over here more on that market side of things. There are some governmental restrictions that would make it a little bit more on the command side, but really Australia's got a pretty free market-based economy, and I would expect it to be more on that market side. Now, your task is going to be do the exact same thing for France. Oui, oui. Sorry. To do the exact same thing for France, you're going to read through and just kind of see and learn a little bit more about the French economy. And as you do, be again looking for evidence of market versus command, but also be asking yourself what economic goals or priorities are important to the French, and then put that info down in here along with where you think you would find it on the spectrum. And then again, same with North Korea. As you read through it, look for evidence of market, evidence of command. Ask yourself what priorities would be most important to North Koreans and the North Korean economy. That is your task. Best of luck. I'm wishing you all the best. Talk to you later. See ya.